the liberalized economic world in which we live has valued intellectual property, and it's governed by a set of laws. And so we all need to kind of play by the rules and play by those laws if we're going to have that kind of trust between each other. But I think you bring up some good points. Let me turn to China right now, which is now, wow, the second largest economy. At what point will China decide to abandon its developing nation status and, well, stop borrowing from the World Bank?
Well, I think this kind of discussion is going on, and I've heard very live discussions about this. And indeed, there are people talking about China already becoming so big. Why don't you just grow up? Basically, I think you said it in your program as well. China grow up. Well, I think we want to grow up. We don't want to be, dwarfed or poor, underdeveloped all the time. But it depends on how you define developing country, right? If you look at China's overall size, the overall size of the Chinese economy, yes, we are very big, the world's #1. But don't forget, we have 1.4 billion people. That is over 3 times the population of the United States. So if you divide the second largest overall economy in the world, basically when it comes down to per capita GDP, we're I think less than 1/6 of that of the United States, and even less than some other more developed countries in Europe. So you tell me, where should we put ourselves? This is a very complicated issue because per capita, as I said, is very small, but overall it's very big. So we can do a lot of big things, and people are looking upon us to do much more around the world. So I think we are doing that. We're contributing to the United Nations. We are the world's biggest contributor to the UN peacekeeping missions, and we're giving out donations and humanitarian aids and all of that because we know we have to grow up. And Trish, thank you for that reminder.
Let's get to the tariffs. I've seen some of your commentaries too, and Xin, I appreciate that you think China could lower some of its tariffs. I watched you say that, and I'm totally in agreement with you. In 2016, the average tariff, effectively a tax, that was charged on an American good in China was 9.9%. Now, that was nearly 3 times what the U.S. was charging. So what do you say about this? What do you think about saying, hey, to heck with these tariffs. Let's get rid of them altogether. Would that work?
I think that would be a wonderful idea. I mean, don't you think for American consumers, products from China would be even cheaper, and for consumers in China, products from America would be so much cheaper too. I think that would be a wonderful idea. I think we should work towards that. But you talked about rule-based system, rule-based order. This is the thing. If you want to change the rules, it has to be done in mutual consensus. Basically, when you talk about tariffs, it is not just between China and the United States. I understand if you lower tariff just between China and the United States, the Europeans will come, the Japanese will come, the Venezuelans probably will come and say, hey, we want the same tariff. You can't discriminate, between countries. So it is a very complicated settlement to reach, and I think the last deals, right? Agreement that China and the about trade, yes, I'm talking about tariffs. And I think the last time when the world agreed on the kind of tariff reduction China should commit to was exactly the result of multilateral and years of difficult negotiations. The United States saw in its interest and decided to what degree they can agree or to what degree they can lower their tariff. Nobody put a gun at their head. And China agreed to, although with some difficulties, to lower our tariff considerably. It is all the decision of countries according to their own self-interest. Now things are different. Yes, I agree. 20 years later, what are we going to do? Maybe these old rules need to be changed. You know what? Let's talk about it. Let's do it according to the rules, the same rules. If you don't like the rules, we'll change the rules. But again, it has to be a multinational, a multilateral decision
I
process.
would just say, you can go back to the trade agreement of 1974, Section 301. There is a rule that enables the United States to use tariffs to try and influence the behavior of China should it be stealing our intellectual property. And that, I think, in some ways is part of what this all comes back to, and it's this sense of trust. And I hear you on the forced technology transfer, and I think that some American companies perhaps have made some mistakes in terms of being willing to overlook what they might have to give up in the near term. But this is an issue, I think, where the country as a whole needs to step in, and we're seeing the United States do that, perhaps in a way that hasn't happened. I mean, it's been in the background. Don't get me wrong. I think previous administrations have identified the challenge, but have really been a little unwilling to take it on. So we're living in these very different times. How do you define state capitalism?
You mean how do I define? Sorry, I didn't hear the last thing. You mean
sure.
Forced technology transfer,
or
so-called
state
forced
capitalism.
technology transfer?
No. Well, I guess forced technology transfer may be part of that, but state capitalism. In other words,
because
one of the things that
I would technology transfer, and somehow you kind of skid it away.
I'm playing you a compliment here. Hang on one second, Xin. I want to say that I think your system of economics is very interesting because you have a capitalist system, right? But it's state-run. So talk to us about that. How do you define it?
Well, we would like to define a socialism with Chinese characteristics where market forces are expected to play the dominating or the deciding role in the allocation of resources. Basically, let the market. We want it to be a market economy, but there are some Chinese characteristics. For instance, some state-owned enterprises which are playing an important but increasingly smaller role, maybe in the economy. And everybody thinks that China's economy is state-owned. Everything is state-controlled. Everything is state. But let me tell you, it is not the true picture. If you look at the statistics, for instance, 80% of Chinese employees were employed by private enterprises. 80% of Chinese exports were done by private companies, were produced by private companies. About 65% of technological innovation were carried out by private enterprises. Some of the largest companies that affect our life, for instance, some internet companies or some 5G technology companies, they are private companies. So we are, yes, a socialist economy with Chinese characteristics, but it's, not everything state-controlled, state-run. It's not like that. We are actually quite mixed and very dynamic and actually very, very open as well.
Well, I think you need to probably keep being open. I think that as a free trade person myself, I think that's the direction to pursue. And ultimately, that leads to greater economic prosperity for you and better economic prosperity for us. And so then you get a win-win. But
absolutely.
This was interesting. I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you want to have a discussion in the future, we can do that. If you want to come to China,
I'd love it.
You're welcome, and I'll take you around. Thank you, Trish, for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Okay, look, I would just say, as I told Xin, no one wants a trade war, but we have to think long and hard about the right next steps.